if you're a small farmer, most of the time your loan, to be able to get a loan, would be in the form of like a coffee buyer doing an advance payment for your next, crop cycle. But when you do like the actual interest on that and calculate out what the return is, it's like, a 200% loan. And so there's a lot of these, informal lending practices that happen that are really not in the benefit of the farmers that create a cycle of poverty for them.
Welcome to the Feast Over Famine podcast. On this podcast, we're navigating the tension that we find where mission and profit collide. We're talking to CEOs, founders, executive directors, impact investors, and all of what we've identified as the global ecosystem of the social enterprise, business for transformation, business as mission landscape. We're talking to them about the obstacles they face, the strategic challenges they've been through, how they're funded, how they were started, and everything that's happened in between. We are trying to share their story in a way that's impactful to help us all to grow the social enterprise space for the better. Enjoy this week's episode with your host, Ryan Mahaffey.
All right, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Feast Over Famine podcast. Really excited you guys are here listening to our conversation about social enterprise, impact investing, and all sorts of good stuff. And I'm really excited for this week's episode. We've got Eskala, which has been a really cool relationship. We'll talk about Global Brigades, who's been on the podcast before. And, I went to Marquette University of Milwaukee, and so I had a cool connection with Global Brigades from that time. And now it's 15 something years later, and Eskala is doing amazing work. One of the cool things about Eskala that I think you guys will hear and appreciate that I've seen is just like they're just a powerhouse team that gets it done. And I've been really impressed with the professionalism and just how hard they've pushed forward and the results on it too. And so I'm really excited to have this conversation. Steve, Colleen, welcome to the podcast. Excited you guys are here.
Thanks for having us, Ryan.
Thanks, Ryan.
Yeah. So guys, we've been talking for a couple of years about Eskala. I think it was maybe a year-ish ago that Global Brigades was on the podcast, Steve. And you guys are launched and not really like the train's rolling and you're not really stopping. Like it's like every time I get an update, it's like awesome impact metrics. You guys are having a lot of success. And there's some really cool data points that you guys have shared that I want to dive into that are cool. But why don't finding a place to start is a little tough because there's a Global Brigade story and then there's a Eskala and there's a problem we're facing and then there's you guys. Maybe just introduce yourselves really quick as the first thing, just a quick 30, 60 seconds of who you guys are, what your backgrounds are, and how you got involved in the Global Brigade's Eskala kind of network.
Yeah, I can start, Ryan. So I'm Colleen O'Brien. Thanks so much for having me on. I've been a longtime friend and supporter of Global Brigades, the nonprofit that you mentioned that is the largest shareholder of Eskala and one of our main investor. And about 2 years ago, the Global Brigades team was eyeing kind of what was next for them, what kind of parts of their business were going to be really interesting as a social enterprise, what they could do that could become self-sustaining in the future. So they approached me along with several other investors to see if we were interested in doing some impact investing in an economic development initiative out of Global Brigades, which is now called Eskala. And I was really excited about it. Not only, the opportunity to create impact in a sustainable way, but also selfishly to get in on the ground floor with kind of a startup team, but that has 20 years of experience in, doing development work in rural Central America. So it's that really unique, like we're in kind of this like small little startup within, a much larger economic development machine. So I decided to not only invest some money in the venture, but also to invest my time by becoming a member of the team. So I've been working with Eskala pretty much since they launched in early 2021.
Awesome. Very cool. Steve?
Yeah, I'm Steve Atamian. I'm one of the co-founders of Global Brigades, the nonprofit we mentioned. So we been for the last, 8-9 years, we've been working on a microfinance and economic development model that was empowering communities that we had been serving through integrated community development work, which includes doing healthcare and water and sanitation projects and economic development. And when it came down to it, like what's exciting to me most about the initiative and why we're here today is that we've seen so much opportunity and so much impact that we're able to make by just being able to infuse capital into community-owned banks and communities to be able to maintain and give out loans to their members and their local families, and have that money be recirculated to grow business. And in the end of the day, you can't afford healthcare, you can't afford water, sanitation projects, you can't afford all these things without a growing economy.
Yeah.
And where we work, they're largely unbanked populations. And so creating that financial infrastructure is paramount. And so it's not as a fluffy nonprofit thing. It's like, hey, this is a banking issue and a banking opportunity, and we need to be treated like that. And so it's where we are with Eskala, and excited. We're super pumped on the first 2 years here, the momentum that we've gotten.
Yeah, cool. Man, there's a lot in there. Okay. So I guess you alluded to a little bit, but quick global brigades, like you threw out, hey, it's been on 20 years, clean water, like you threw out a little bit of that stuff, but give me a little bit of the overarching who Global Brigades is, how it's run. It's a nonprofit, where it's headquartered, all that kind of stuff, and kind of the countries. You're doing a little bit, I think, in Ghana as well, right? And so give us a little bit more of that piece.
Yeah. So near and dear to your heart, Ryan, Global Brigades launched almost 20 years ago at Marquette University in Wisconsin. And they started off as a medical relief organization. And then, as the organization grew and the movement grew, they started incorporating water and sanitation into their scope, started in Central America. And as you mentioned, have expanded to Ghana and Greece since then. And through all of that work of, setting up medical relief and WASH, the Global Brigades team really saw that need for economic development at the center of that. Like, how do you fund a super expensive water project without a huge donation or a loan? And then how do you repair the inevitable, leak that happens without a savings account or, some mechanism to gather money from the community for that rainy day fund? So that's where Eskala was really born out of. The GB team actually got a grant from the World Bank to kind of develop their economic development model. And as Steve alluded to, that's really where they started to blend, microfinance as we know it today with creating that financial infrastructure, creating those community-owned, community-led banks, capitalizing them, as well as providing financial literacy training and also making equity investments in them. So that's another really big piece of what we do is how do we create an asset in a community and not just pile on more debt?
Yeah, totally. Well, and there's a lot you guys kind of alluded to in there. One that I appreciate is just the tension around, okay, if we're helping impoverished regions, like you almost need to fundraise and bring capital in. And so there's a philanthropic effort there, but then you don't want to do that forever, right? And so typically the way these models work, and I think the way Global Brigades has works, like, okay, we got to fundraise, and okay, we got to fundraise, and okay, now we got to fundraise. Now that's okay, because I think the heart of philanthropy in humans is really beautiful and really needed. And I don't want that to go away. On the flip side of that, we want to go in and help. And then we want to create sustainable ability that's not reliant on that Western world kind of capital, we'll call it. And so I think it's really cool, that tension as a nonprofit. Like, a lot of nonprofits don't wrestle with that tension the way Global Brigades did, to say, there's a part where helping is going to hurt, and what are we going to do with that? So I think that's just that's a really cool piece of the puzzle that you guys have wrestled with. The other one I want to talk about is just banking. And so you guys have you guys are deep in it. And so when you talk about it, you're like, yeah, there's no banking in this, and you use words and things, and it's kind of confusing. But let's take an example. Like, I don't think most people listening really have thought much or researched or understand what the banking system looks like in rural, impoverished Central America, right? That's not something most people think about. So educate us a little bit on what is out there, how does it work, what are the challenges of having it, of not having it, how has it failed in the past, all those kinds of things. Give us a little rundown of that part.
Do you want to take that one, Steve?
Sure. So it ranges pretty widely throughout Central America, but we work mostly in the rural areas where there's a highly unbanked populations. So we work in Honduras, Nicaragua, Panama, and in the rural parts where, so if you're a small farmer, most of the time your loan, to be able to get a loan, would be in the form of like a coffee buyer doing an advance payment for your next, crop cycle. But when you do like the actual interest on that and calculate out what the return is, it's like, a 200% loan.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of these, informal lending practices that happen that are really not in the benefit of the farmers that create a cycle of poverty for them and perpetuate that. And then there really isn't a culture of savings and even or a mechanism for savings a lot of times. And so what we found is that and the other thing is, even if the community was fortunate to have like a microfinance institution or a traditional microfinance institution come in, and microfinance, meaning, sorry, not to use buzzwords, right? But like the people that are providing small loans to those types of communities, right? It's right. Most banks won't do this because it's not profitable. Like you're giving like a $300 loan to someone, right? And all the diligence, all the things that to collect even on that $300 is not worth it, the time and energy for it. So the traditional banks aren't going to go out to those really rural areas. So there are some of these microfinance organizations that are, a lot of them philanthropic in nature, that will go do that. Challenge with that is a lot of them most of the industry lends directly to the farmer. And so what happens is, imagine if, you're an isolated community, or here, even in the United States, if all of our, and we'll look at it at a country level, if all of the money that we ever received for a loan for our small businesses came from a 50% loan from Germany, how would our economy develop? Right? There's no recirculation of capital back into our local areas. And so the solution behind that, that we developed and through research and everything else was, in Spanish, it's called a caja rural. It's basically a small people that are working in Africa. They have what's called a village saving and loans groups. There's different flavors of it, but essentially it's a group of leaders from the community that come together to say, hey, we're going to start our own savings and loan cooperative, essentially. And we're going to go in. Eskala comes in and helps form that and provide them infrastructure, do follow-up and training and capital and seed capital to do it. And a lot of monitoring, a lot of technology so that we can track how they're performing. So they become really the engine behind it. And those circles form. Capital goes into them, and then they make out loans to their members, and those members repay that back plus interest into the community bank, and then it can get recirculated back in for other members and other people in the community. And so to make the Global Brigades connection, it's basically Global Brigades formed with these groups of students on university campuses in North America and Europe that wanted to mobilize to help communities abroad. And so these community banks kind of they're a mirror of that. There's a local community that's mobilized together to create a movement of local leaders that are really developing out their economic development, their goals, and it's just a beautiful thing for leadership and empowerment.
It's really special, like how local led that is. And I think that's something that's always been forefront for you guys. It's not you guys going in and running a bank. And when it's local led, I think you have a different, we're all white Westerners that are like going into that area. Like we don't culturally understand that. Like that's going to take a long time. And if you're going to do that at a mass level, like especially in Central America, when you got in those rural communities, there's all sorts of different like cultures and subcultures and like all sorts of things going on. And so to understand that and have a mass model would be tough. But when you get it community led, you understand the culture of it, but that also leads to, I think, just a different burden for like generosity. Right. And so they hurt for people in their community in a different way than we would because they see that. And I'm assuming, and we'll get to the default rate later, which is almost nothing for you guys. Like they also know who in their community and they can read that. Like if someone walks in, like to say we all have a judgmental side, but you can kind of look at and talk to, and within 30, 60 seconds, be like, this guy, this girl, this person's like kind of full of it. Like what's going on here in the States, but like for you guys. Yeah. So I think that local ed piece is really, really cool that you guys have put in place on that.
It's everything. I mean, like and that is the difference. So you mentioned that the default rate, like, so our loan portfolio is not huge. I mean, it was only a $3 million, a little over $3 million loan portfolio. We've distributed over 4 million over the course of the last few years, but we have nearly a 0% default, and people don't believe it. And they're like, well, microfinance organizations default at 30 to 40%. And we're like, actually we're at 0. And it's like, and we're exceeding all of these metrics. And it goes to shows us the difference in methodology is night and day from our perspective. What we've seen work in rural communities, and it's much different to default on, even with a savings and loans group, when your lender is still an outside organization, not a part of your community. And I'm talking about like a Grameen model, not to critique like the king of microfinance, but like even in the Grameen, which all respect, right? But even in that model, they aren't the bank, right?
Yeah.
The community doesn't own the bank, and the savings and loans and the opportunity doesn't get fully recirculated in that hyper local community, and so that's the emphasis, and that's the competitive advantage of why Global Brigades did this. We didn't go into it like being we're going to be a microfinance institution. It's like we're an economic development organization that understands like what poverty alleviation looks like. And it just so happens that the business side of that aligns to it perfectly, because if they're all defaulting on it and there's delinquency on all the time, they're not growing economically, right? But through that model of empowerment and through that model of the community coming together to actually own it, they have so much pride in that institution at their local level that they will do whatever means possible to repay that back and repay those loans so that their neighbor will have that loan.
Yeah. It's super. I mean, it's almost like, oh yeah, that makes perfect sense. This was really easy to say that. And yet it's working. So it's like, oh, well, that was easy all along. I mean, you kind of took a little bit of a shot at microfinance on accident, but kind of, I mean, it's microfinance is needed. Small agricultural $300 loans are needed. That's part of what you guys are doing. I guess let's start here. What's kind of the average kind of loan that you guys are doing? Are these like, $300 and they're for a farming, like a working capital for a season's worth of seeds for crops? Are these small businesses that are being started up? Because where I'm going with this is one of the challenges with microfinance, I think sometimes is you can kind of keep communities stuck at a certain point of history, right? And so, for example, we know organizations in Kenya that are helping women come out of human trafficking and saying, well, let's teach them, like, instead of having them sew bags, for example, why don't we teach them like photo editing skills and have them subcontract to realtors? Like Next Door Photos does that, which is a great organization. And so because they're teaching them a 21st century skill set, that's going to allow them to kind of progress and go get a job and then learn in computer tech skills. And so it's moving them out of that point in history. Now, at the same time, like right before I was talking to you guys, I was recording a podcast with a coffee exporter in Africa that's doing great work in agriculture. And you want that because coffee is great. And so there's a tension there, I think, in the microfinance of like, how are we progressing communities technologically so that they can like compete and have skill sets that are valuable, and at the same time valuing what they have. So with that piece of the conversation, I'm curious your thoughts on that, also mixed with what are you guys seeing the loans for? And are you guys challenging people to do that? So there's a lot in there to kind of unpack, but I'm curious your thoughts on all that stuff.
Yeah. So going back to your original question about loan size, it does vary. We work across Honduras, Panama, and Nicaragua. So it does vary, the country and client. And, as a reminder, because we're going into the communities and either helping them start their own community bank or becoming partners in their existing community bank, we're actually lending to that bank. And then, which helps a few things. It helps de-risk us a little bit. It helps our admin costs and things like that about following up on loans. And like to your point earlier, I don't know if Mike deserves a loan. I don't know if Ryan deserves a loan, right? But his neighbor does, and his neighbor knows the business and all that. So that really helps our default rates as well. But as far as like that end borrower, that farmer loan, I mean, it can vary, between $200 and a couple $1,000. And then on the community bank level, we have small ones in Panama that, get a couple $1,000, a year. And then, larger ones, across more in Honduras and a little bit in Panama that are getting more in the tens of thousands of dollars. And then they are making those loan decisions and distributing it in their community. And as far as the types of loans, it's really across the board. We do a lot of agriculture, as you can imagine, in Honduras, tons of coffee production happening there. Local farmers. We do a lot of work with coffee co-ops, which is just, I love that model. I love what they do. Giving someone that has a small, piece of land, the opportunity to, be able to, combine their crop with others and be able to get a fair market value for that crop. And the fact that we're able to help them with that and help them, move to organic and get fertilizer and bridge that gap between seasons I just love that, that business and that group of people. And there's also, entrepreneurs doing all sorts of things, convenience stores, selling different types of crafts and things. So we really see a wide variety of businesses.
Yeah. Very cool. Very cool. This kind of goes in line with that. Like if you guys do a good job, like if Eskala is successful and all these loans are successful, people are growing in business, like what are some of the macro success metrics that you guys would want to see as a result of that? Whether that's what got me thinking on this a little bit was when like talking about the types of businesses, like a lot of those types of businesses aren't major employers, right? It's not a major factory that's going in or a production facility that's going to employ 500 people. And then that now creates cash in the economy for transfer of goods and service. Like it's not doing that. So, raising employment rate wouldn't maybe be maybe it would be, but it's not a massive one. So what are the kind of the needles that would be moved by this, that you guys, if we're sitting here 5-10 years from now, you say, oh, that was a job well done kind of thing.
We look a lot at like savings accounts, how is our financial literacy changing in that community? And we talk about, and I think we've talked about this a little bit in the past, Ryan, like ultimately like creating a culture of investment in these communities and where it's not just, okay, when can I get my next loan? And I'm taking on all this risk and all this, all this exposure to to plant my new crop or to add inventory to my store. But how can we create that culture of investment so that, people like Eskala or people in their community are really sharing that risk together, and sharing that reward together as well. I think that's a huge, pie in the sky goal for us. And I don't know exactly how you measure that, maybe how many shareholders there are in the future there. But that and more near-term savings accounts and that financial literacy piece is big for us.
Yeah, that's super cool. Yeah. Cause you're cool. Like at a certain point, hopefully Eskala isn't needed. Now it'll always be needed, but that would be pretty cool. Funny. Like they don't we're paid back, like the bank's functioning and people are putting their money. I mean, it's kind of crazy to think like that's just how our American banking, so like that's just how it works. And it's just such a standard part of functioning society that the fact that that's not there seems crazy to a lot of us, Westerners. But to just imagine that that's not even there, like that's not a thing, right? And that's really, really interesting and intriguing and cool.
And Ryan, just some,
go ahead.
It's absolutely the intention that they don't need us. That's the difference between like a traditional. We're not trying to continue to lend to them, and why some of the equity and other profit shares are things that we're working out is so important for our long-term financial and to align those incentives or align those goals. The metrics for goals is we want them to have their own credit scores, their own capacity, that they can get loans from anywhere else, right? And that they're viewed as seen as like a viable borrower. The demand for small farming, small farmer loans in just Latin American loans, like was it last report that the UNDP put out was like $2 trillion or something like that. Like we're never going to fulfill like that. Like so, right? So it's really creating the infrastructure and creating the credit capacity of people to be able to apply and get those loans from other people, and that's really the long game. And it's again back to the roots of development work. It's not like just counting how many loans we have.
Yeah. What's unique about Central America and all this? Like, obviously that's where Global Brigades has done a lot of work. Obviously you're doing some work in Ghana, and there's communities all over the world that need this kind of thing. And maybe that's the goal of Eskala someday, is to just be everywhere around the world. And that's cool. But is there something unique about Central America that either that makes this problem more challenging, maybe a geopolitical piece, economic, like what's unique about it?
I think I can give a simple answer, then maybe Steve can expand on it. But, when we talk about Eskala spinning off from Global Brigades, guess where we have an amazing team of people that have been working in these communities for the last 10 years. It's the communities that Global Brigades has done so much work in and been a part of. So that for us as Eskala right now, Honduras, Panama, Nicaragua, Central America is kind of that low hanging fruit. We have infrastructure, we have experience. That's what the model was developed for. That's where the grants had been given to develop our model. Like you said, there's so much need around the world. And, we have dreams of a franchise model. How can we get our technology and our financial literacy and all these pieces that we do really well? How can we get those to other countries in the hands of people that know those communities and know, like you said, the legal structure there? Because it's so complicated doing, having these different registrations in these different countries, even within Central America, the difference between our Panama, registrations and our Honduras, like it's all really complicated. So how can we empower people with the Eskala model, and with, the microequity model, and put it in the hands of people that know what they're doing in their regions?
Yeah, I think in long-term for us, I think it's a matter of creating a blueprint that could either be like franchised or that type of thing, and empowering other organizations to take their model to their country and adapt and apply it. Because as Colleen said, like even the difference between doing the work in Honduras and a bordering country like Nicaragua is different, right? And you go further south to Panama, it's different even. So there is quite a bit of cultural adaptations to the model and I think that's a reason why we were successful. We leaned in on where we knew. And we didn't just start going everywhere with it and trying to focus it. And so, I think that's our aspiration is to not to necessarily have like our own operations in all these countries over the world, but build up Eskala as a brand that means like hyper community empowerment, recirculation of funds, microequity, all of these like foundational principles of our organization, and be able to identify, other organizations to align to that, to bring it to their countries.
Yeah, very cool. Yeah. I love that expansion idea. Just thinking through all the different possibilities and even it just as like a template and in your guys' heart to like, this isn't the Eskala thing that Eskala is going to fix. This is like a proof. You've already proven the concept, but it's a continual proof of concept. So enough people catch on and it just becomes the kind of societal norm in those areas, which is really, really special and cool. All right, everyone, I want to take a quick break from today's episode and just share a little bit about Impact Foundation, who's got an incredibly awesome model of using impact investment, charitable dollars, and funding tons of projects all over the world right now. But what if your investments could change the world? At Impact Foundation, they believe business with purpose has the power to transform society. Purpose-built for impact investing, Impact Foundation provides a streamlined way to fund businesses that seek social and spiritual transformation or make loans to charity, all while earning a financial return to grow your giving. Donors and investors have already supported more than 200 redemptive enterprises through their impact accounts. They provide needed fuel for companies that exist as a force of God's redemptive work in the world. To learn more about what they're doing in their Kingdom Impact Investing model, visit impactfoundation.org. All right, shifting gears a lot then, which I think will be interesting. One of the things a lot of organizations struggle with, especially when they're thinking through their model, is like, okay, are we a nonprofit or are we a for-profit? Okay, if we're going to bring on capital, what kind of capital and what's the exit strategy? And are we getting enough to investors or not? And how do we tell that story? And something that fascinates me a ton. And then, we help a lot of organizations with that, obviously, is like I call it entity structure modeling. Like, how do we figure this stuff out? That was a really cool journey for you guys that I got to kind of sit on the sidelines over a couple of years, I feel like, and just be like, oh yeah, that's cool. That's interesting to all the way where you guys ended up landing. Talk to me a little bit about that journey, like different paths you went down, things where you landed, obviously, but what was a hard no, and how you guys wrestled through that for a season to landing to where you're at now and the model you have and why.
The why for the type of legal structure? Yeah.
Like the legal structure you chose, how you got there, all that stuff. Yeah.
So, Colleen, would you like me to?
Yeah, I think so. I came in, I think, after the legal structure had been defined. So I'd love to hear Steve's take on this.
You got to pass on that one. You're like, you know what? Yeah. I'm glad that was figured out before you inherited part of it.
Yeah, it's a public benefit corporation in Delaware. So like a B Corp kind of enterprise. Why we didn't do it as a nonprofit was pretty straightforward. We had supporters of Global Brigades that saw the commercial opportunity for this, and had an appetite for like being a part of it as an investor and not a donation. And I think it goes back to what you were saying earlier, Ryan, of like a mindset of when nonprofits just continue asking for money for fundraising.
Yeah.
Versus like, we're going to do an equity round and, right. And we're going to meet these projections and we're going to be profitable by X date, and like holding ourselves accountable to that and running it like a business. Our investors really identified with that, and they shared the social mission of it. A lot of them probably would have donated it, some of that money anyways, right?
Yeah.
But they probably would, but they wouldn't have donated this much. And I think it's because of that extra levels of accountability. And I think from a scale side, I think the biggest thing is that once Eskala is able to also, as a for-profit, is able to issue shares in the form of either like phantom stock and other types of performance shares to the communities themselves. So we've actually reserved about the equivalent of about 20% of our value to the CAHs or to the banks themselves, that they would then benefit as, if we ever get a larger exit or down the road, we raise more money, giving them an ability to, ride that train as well and with the organization. And so that's
just a quick point on that. Like, that's something I've seen you guys be pretty generous with. Like, you guys have held to the conviction to be generous with that throughout the whole process. As I've talked to you guys, just even in the fact that Global Brigades is the main shareholder, which is a nonprofit entity in itself and stuff. I think that's been and let me clarify. I don't think that's always the right answer. I think personal wealth building. I mean, Colleen, your husband building a very cool tech platform that we talked earlier, like sometimes endeavors like can be both impact and for like building wealth and that thing. And sometimes they're meant to like generously do some combo. And so I think you guys have held that conviction really well. And so just to call that out, I think that's a cool example of, hey, like, let's reserve some equity so that if this happens, they get a portion of that as well. I think that's really cool. And people wrestle through that a lot. So I think it's cool for them to hear that part of the story. Sorry to interrupt, Steve. I just wanted to call that out. I think it's an important part.
No, it's again, and even this is probably going too technical, but because I have a leadership position in the nonprofit, I'm excluded in the ownership of Eskala because there's conflict of interest in things. So it's good and bad, like to your point, like in terms of like really trying to profit maximize and create the individual wealth. But from like, I think from like a social mission standpoint, it keeps us really focused on who the beneficiary, why we're doing this work, right? Like it's, and if the communities aren't benefiting from this, Global Brigades isn't ultimately get to benefit from this through, its increase in value to do the other type of development work as well, then we lost sight of what we're trying to do, which is eradicate poverty, right? And we can't eradicate poverty with just loans, right? So we know that there's other aspects of this, like water sanitation, like healthcare, like other things that need to be addressed, so that hopefully the success of Eskala will lead to all, all of these types of offerings and programs being implemented in the communities.
Totally. Yeah. That's super cool. I love it. What are you guys? So let's talk WeFunder for a second. So you guys, one of the ways you decided to do this amongst all the crazy other fun legal structure conversations and things you guys had is you decided to be one of the first platforms that or first organizations that is used, as far as I know, a platform like WeFunder, which is a Reg CF crowdfunding platform, in a loan kind of debt model, which is really cool. So talk to me a little bit about the WeFunder, and you just launched it in the past month or so. So talk to me a little bit about WeFunder, what's going on there, why you guys chose to do that, and how that's going.
Yeah, absolutely. We're really excited about the campaign on WeFunder. As you mentioned, we launched about a month ago. We've already raised almost $90,000. And it's a loan. So as you mentioned, I think WeFunder is traditionally thought of for actually making those equity investments. And we've been super, super fortunate in our ability to attract impact investors in our networks and in the Global Brigades network. And we've raised, I think, about $2.5 million since we launched. And so we felt very well covered on the equity side. And as you know, we've talked about, there's just no end to the demand for capital in the communities we serve. What's really surprising me since getting involved with Eskala is everyone, from the small farmer up to the, 1,000 farmer coffee co-op needs more capital. Even people that you look at like, oh, they've got a great operation. They've got nice machinery. They've got this, they need working capital.
Totally.
We've just, our biggest struggle, our biggest challenge has been how to get more low interest debt capital here that we can then deploy in the communities. So I think we got connected through you to WeFunder and have been able to use their platform to raise a loan for as little as $100. You can go on and send your $100, put it to work in Central America. And then it's a 5-year note. In 5 years, you'll get paid your 5% annual interest on that loan. So it's, it's new for people, right? They're used to like, okay, go fund me. I send you $100 and I get a backpack, or, I'm giving to, a nonprofit organization and I'm going to write it off, or I'm going to invest. So it's a little bit of a blend of everything, but we love it because it gives people, that want to make an impact, and want to get their money back to then recycle it. You can recycle it back into Eskala. You can give it to your local Boys and Girls Club. It's just, it's again, going back to that like sustainable, business practice that we're so passionate about. So we're really excited about it. We hope people, will get excited about it as well. Yeah.
Well, and it's good that they are. I mean, that was one of my big questions is like, and this isn't a shot at WeFunder, but it's like, does the community of people on WeFunder that are normally focused on, it's like your E-Trade account. It's like, I'm going on to make money. I'm an investor, like due diligence. And that's the point. That's okay. And I think WeFunder's done a good job of integrating, not necessarily integrating impact first, but integrating impact second, like companies that care about having an impact as well as profit. But I think I was curious to see how their community responded. If they said, wow, the amount of risk is, doesn't outweigh, like the risk plus impact plus return equation for them was worthwhile because you're taking more risk for less return in some scenario, but you're having an impact and that's worth it. And so I've just been excited to see that people are saying that's worth it. And that's the beauty of impact investing and what we're hoping to see kind of grow and do that, which is really cool. And then, obviously that's the goal of what's going to happen in the communities that you guys are in. So it's really cool. What else are you guys excited about? Like what else is on the horizon as we kind of wrap up here that is coming down the pipelines or strategically you guys are thinking about or working on in the background that you're really excited about?
We touched on it a little bit. The franchise model has been coming up in a lot of our conversations lately. How can we maximize our impact, and really, with quite frankly limited funds. We're limited into what we can raise on debt and equity otherwise. But how can we continue to empower more communities, regardless of those limitations, and spread the word and lift everyone up together.
Yeah,
Awesome.
Totally. And the other thing I'm excited about is which is aligned to what Colleen was saying in the franchise model, is our adoption of technology as a part of our solution. And we've now had last 6 months or so, getting really good response from community banks to using our software to input a lot of their data and they record their loans. And so in time here, we'll have really up-to-date information, not only on how the Caja is performing to our loans, so obviously our loans are kept track of, but all the way down at that individual borrower level and seeing trends in real time, and in communities that don't have internet, but we're able to get that from cell phones and other data points. So it's really neat data stuff that's going to be coming out over the next year or two.
Well, and I mean, a lot of people would kill for that data, like global economics wise, government and massive NGOs, to see some of that stuff and how it's working. And even just for profit, there's a lot there that nailing the tech side, one, just operationally for you guys is going to free you up to do more impact stuff. But then, you guys might be selling a lot of data in the future in a really cool way. And that's a whole other revenue stream, which is really cool.
Teach us about that, Ryan. We don't know much about that. So we'll have to learn from that.
We'll see.
Our ears are open.
You're like, oh, there's another revenue stream. This sounds good. That's cool. And then I guess the last question is let's say this thing just blows up. You guys it's really profitable. It's really sustainable. Global Brigades is a main shareholder. What do you guys are there things that you guys have had on a whiteboard, just kind of wish list in this process? You said, man, if this really just blows up, Global Brigades is going to do that because that's needed and it's really freaking cool, but we need some capital for it. Anything like that you guys are excited about on the Global Brigade side?
What comes to mind for me, and I'm not as close to the Global Brigade side as Steve is, but we've talked a lot about long-term loans for water systems.
Cool.
We'd love to have that product, just be able to give really low interest, really, long-term loans so that communities can, pay for their own water system. And then the next community gets that, just to continue to recycle that money and not just be so reliant on donations in these communities. That's a huge dream of ours. And I think if we blow up, that's the first thing I'm adding.
Totally. Ditto.
Yeah. So I saw Steve's face there. He's like, yes, that's exactly what I was. That's good. No, that's really cool. And that's one of the things I love about you guys. It's always, you guys are very strategic, progressively thinking oh, this leads to this so that we can keep doing more good, but you guys do it the right way. And you guys are pretty patient and you guys, I think perform at a high level. So I'm very thankful for the friendship and what you guys are doing. And thanks for being on the podcast and sharing it all. And we'll keep pushing you guys' stuff out and watching the story, which is really cool.
Thanks for your support, Ryan. It means a lot.
Thank you, Ryan. Definitely.
All right, everyone. Thank you for listening to another week of the Feast Over Famine podcast. We are so thankful you guys are here and listening. As always, hit that subscribe button on your favorite podcast listening apps. We would love to keep you guys up to date on new episodes that are coming out, when we're launching new episodes, when we're launching new seasons, and everything in between. So when we're in season, episodes are dropping every single Wednesday. Hit that subscribe button. Make sure you're up to date. Also, if you're loving what we're doing, be sure to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, where we're constantly posting about our projects, what they're doing, what kinds of things we're working on. We'll recycle some podcasts, things about our partners, all sorts of fun stuff that you want to see. So hit us up on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, all that kind of stuff, and check out what we're doing there. And yeah, we're stoked that you guys are listening. We hope this has been really fruitful, and we will catch you guys next week. And lastly, as you guys all know, we always talk about all sorts of things with impact investing, investment opportunities, entity structure modeling, how projects are getting capital. And as a disclaimer and a reminder, Feast Over Famine does not provide legal, tax, accounting, or other professional advice. You should consult professional advisors concerning the legal, tax, or accounting consequences of any activities related to your project or a project you're supporting. Feast Over Famine doesn't consult, advise, or assist with the offer or sale of securities in any capital raising transaction. We don't do that for the direct or indirect promotion or maintenance of a market for any securities. And Feast Over Famine does not engage in any activities for which an investment advisor's registration or license is required under the U.S. Investment Advisors Act of 1940 or under any other applicable federal or state law, or for which a broker's or dealer's registration or license is required under the U.S. Securities Exchange Act of 1934 or under any other applicable federal or state law. So there's your investment disclaimer. Hopefully that's helpful if you need it. And if you ever have any questions on that side of things, don't hesitate to reach out to us. Take care.